and welcome to the MVAC lab. I'm research intern Cindy Kocik, and today we're going to explore profiles, stratigraphy, and soils in archaeology. Archaeologists try to understand both the horizontal and vertical layouts of sites and broader areas, and put these together to explore the past as people lived it, in 3 dimensions. To study the vertical layout, we look at the different layers, or the stratigraphy, of various soil types and remnants of human activity in profile. It helps us to keep in mind the natural soil formation processes that have acted on the soil up to the present. These include topography, climate, the actions of organisms from the microscopic up to very large animals and plants, and the passage of time. These impact the soil types present and their depth, as well as the conditions in which we find archaeological remains. Taking into account all of these factors aids us in understanding what happened and how things changed over time. The landforms and conditions during the occupation of an archaeological site, why people might have chosen to live there, the effects they had on the land, and what has occurred up to now. The law of superposition guides our work. This principle states that deeper layers in a sequence usually were deposited first, with the next layers coming in successively up to the highest and most recent. This stratigraphic column model here at the lab shows the cultural traditions of the Crosse and wider region in chronological order, starting with the earliest, Paleo, moving up through Archaic, Woodland, Oneota, and near the top, the historic period. We observe profiles when we dig small shovel tests, excavation units, trenches, and features. We also see them when we examine areas where land has been mechanically cut or naturally eroded or fallen away, like at stream banks. Sometimes we take soil columns or cores, like this one from Silver Mound in Jackson County, Wisconsin. Researching the soil types generally present in the area we're investigating, whether through an online resource like the USDA NRCS Web Soil Survey, or print sources like county soil surveys, tells us which soil types to expect. So what can we see in profile? We find soil layers moving down from organic matter at the surface to topsoil, or the A horizon, as marked here, then subsoil, or B, down to C, eventually transitioning to bedrock. We can also see the results of natural processes like alluvium deposited from waterways and buried surfaces. Getting into human activity, we often find plow zone at the surface, where relatively modern plowing has churned up the soil. This example is from Cataract, Wisconsin. We also might see post-settlement alluvium, or PSA, where recent human activity, especially plowing, has caused sediments to run off with water and be redeposited. The layers beneath these, like the middle one here, might contain intact or undisturbed cultural material. We're especially, as archaeologists, looking for features where human activity has taken place and has changed the soil. In the La Crosse region, features are usually darker than the surrounding soil because they have higher organic material content. We keep exploring cultural traces down to sterile subsoil, like this layer at the bottom here. Now, let's take a closer look at those cultural traces I just mentioned in the form of features. We usually start by mapping features from the top in plan view. On the left is feature 439 from an Oneota site in Onalaska, Wisconsin. Then we normally split the feature lengthwise and excavate 1/2 by levels in 10 centimeters or another set measurement. This allows us to keep track of where artifacts were found and how that distribution changes with the depth of the feature. After digging the first half, we can see a cross-section or profile view and the depositional episode or episodes represented. For example, a straight-walled basin, a bell-shaped storage pit, or a shallow lens of refuse. On the right is the profile for feature 439. Looking at the profile, we begin to get an idea of how the feature relates to the surrounding soil. And we might see events like wash-ins and slumps of surrounding soil into the feature. We take notes on, photograph, and map the profile to scale on graph paper. Here we have a 10 centimeter scale. We also include the site number, the feature number or code, the compass direction of the profile wall, the feature's maximum depth, and the date. We define distinct areas where the soil consistency, color, or contents are different and could represent a different activity as zones. We usually label these zones using letters of the alphabet starting with A. Here we have zones A, B, C, and D. We describe the color of each zone using a Munsell soil color chart for consistency. These are the 10 YR readings that you see here. We also record the texture and any other notable characteristics of the soil in each zone. We want to note artifacts or artifact clusters, bone and shell, and concentrations of charred plant material as well, like this layer of corn and beans. We add these details to our maps and notes. Then we normally excavate the second half of the feature by zones and take soil samples or matrix to further study plant and animal remains. Features can be quite simple or incredibly complex, like this one from Unalaska, Wisconsin, with darker deposits and zones of ash. They may contain 1 or 2 zones to over a dozen and reach depths of a few centimeters up to 60, 80, or more. Boundaries can vary from sharp to nearly indistinguishable from the surrounding soil. Considering the different zones and their contents, like diagnostic artifacts, along with specialized analyses like radiocarbon dating, helps us to interpret what happened to create a feature, as well as the time period or periods represented. Animal and plant remains, in addition to providing other important information, can indicate the season or seasons represented. As briefly touched on already, we also need to take into account processes that have altered cultural deposits since their original formation. Weathering, erosion, animals, and plants continually affect the soil. Plants and burrowing animals, like gophers, can interrupt features and model the soil, as these examples show. We call this activity bioturbation, and it can move artifacts outside of their original context and disturb feature boundaries, altering our ability to interpret the feature. Modern and historic human disturbance affects what we find in our interpretation as well. Examples include trenches, foundations, and other relatively recent modifications to the landscape like water lines. We at times see similar instances in the deeper past, for example, where one pit was dug into another. A variety of activities leave their trace and profile. Understanding the sequence and relationship of these events and what each represents helps us to interpret their broader meaning. Every cross-sectional view adds new layers to our understanding of the past. For more information, see the description box. And to explore more archaeological topics, find links to MVAC's social media, and to view and subscribe to our monthly e-news, see the MVAC website. Thanks for watching.